Dr. Fauci, did the CIA ever transfer funds to NIH under an interagency agreement?
On the advice of counsel, I respectfully decline to answer based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution.
That is not a very long answer, but at a Senate hearing this week, Anthony Fauci found more than 100 occasions to give some version of it. Fauci had been subpoenaed after declining to appear voluntarily before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. Senator Rand Paul wanted to question him about the origins of COVID, federally funded research, and diaries that Fauci kept during the pandemic. On the advice of his lawyers, Fauci invoked his Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination again and again and again. Now, I want to be clear, invoking the Fifth is not an admission of guilt. It's an important constitutional protection. But constitutional rights can't protect you from becoming a political symbol. But the most revealing thing about this hearing was not that Americans disagreed about Anthony Fauci. Americans can disagree about almost anything. Somewhere, right now in America, two people are undoubtedly screaming at each other about the correct direction for the toilet paper to hang. What mattered was that almost no one seemed to expect the hearing to produce an answer that might change anyone's mind. It could produce accusations, it could certainly produce viral clips, but it was very unlikely to produce a set of facts that both sides would accept. The hearing was about Fauci, but the larger argument was about whether Americans can still trust the institutions that tell us what is true. And you know what that reminds me of? This.
You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
They're both part of that favorite conservative punching bag, the expert class. The expert class is a beautiful thing in many ways. It builds bridges and solves vexing historical mysteries and cures terrible diseases. It also keeps America at the economic and technological frontier. No complex modern society could run without its expert class, and though conservatives will probably get mad at me for saying this, our experts actually generally do pretty well. Now, I know, you want to tell me about all the things they didn't do well, about diversity mandates and COVID school closures and a zillion other things, and folks, I agree with you about a lot of that. But that's not most of what experts were doing during that time. You didn't notice most of what they were doing during that time. You noticed a very small fraction of their activity that made you mad, and that wasn't even done by most of them, it was done by a minority. Now, I'm not going to tell you that you're wrong to be mad. I think those mistakes urgently need to be fixed. My own profession has begun a course correction, and academia needs one even worse than we did. But you can't steer a boat by firing torpedoes into its sides. You have to actually steer the thing carefully so that you don't run the whole thing aground. So today, I want to talk about what real reform would look like for one of those institutions, and arguably the most important institution, America's world-class higher education system. We're going to talk about why reform is needed, why it is quite hard, and how we are going to do that very difficult thing.
All right, so to start with, let's just talk about what a university really does. What is it selling to its audience? I know academics are going to get super mad when I say this. They're going to say, no, we're not a business, and it's fair enough. But you are giving goods and services to people in society. And what are those goods and services? Well, obviously teaching, right? You teach people skills. You give them job credentials. This is not a favorite topic of academics, but realistically, at least part of the value of a college diploma is not in what you learned in school, but it's in the fact that it's certified that you can sit in a seat for 4 years, do your homework on time, and to a certain kind of socialization that people get at college, being around other college-educated people, preparing them for a professional class job. Obviously, academics also do a huge amount of research. This varies by faculty, right, and varies by institution, but that's a big part of what academia contributes to society, from figuring out what happened 40,000 years ago to figuring out how to get humanity to the stars or cure cancer or all number of other great, valuable things for society. But there's a part of what academia does that I think we don't necessarily always think about, which is it certifies knowledge for us, right? It's not just finding new facts, it's telling us what are facts. It's giving us a certain amount of epistemic confidence in what we know. That's really valuable. They're kind of like a bond rating agency for facts. And that's a kind of heady position to be in. We all have to go through our lives on trust. I don't know how my television works. I don't know that my food won't kill me. Someone else has to certify those things for me because I can't possibly know. And the more complicated society is, and our society is the most complicated society in human history, just in terms of the sheer amount of complexity in the economy, in the technology we use, and so forth. We take things on trust. Is global warming happening? Is evolution correct? I sort of understand the mechanisms, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't done the math. I haven't studied that much physics. I haven't studied the deep roots of evolution or geology. I am taking those things on trust. That's a really valuable service to provide to society. The thing about being a credit rating agency or a bond rating agency for knowledge, as I said, is that that position, it presents a certain kind of temptation. As you may remember, during the financial crisis, the bond rating agencies got into a bit of a scandal. And that's something that can happen in all sorts of industries that do that. Because if you bend that just a little bit, not really a lot, you can convince people of things that you think are good.
If we don't give them the ratings, they'll go to Moody's, right down the block. If we don't work with them, they will go to our competitors. Not our fault. Simply the way the world works.
Maybe they're good because they help you make more money. That's the worst motivation, but maybe they're good because they help you do some political project or help people. The problem is that you're spending down that reputation and eventually you can have a catastrophic collapse. But fooling people has to be treated as a fundamental violation of those institutional norms, or you will lose the power to fool people. And this is, I think, what has happened in academia, as well as nonprofits, government bureaucracies, a lot of other places. And ultimately what was happening was that people who believed that they were fighting incredibly important battles against racism, systemic injustice, and so forth, they looked at their institutional power to say what is true, to tell people the facts about the world. And they thought, well, I could use that institutional credibility to do enormous good, to make society so much better. So they just kept borrowing a little more of that credibility. And they didn't necessarily have the effect on the world that they thought they were having. Instead, they were squandering that reputational capital. You know, when I write about this these days, I hear from academic friends and also strangers, and they say, like, look, this isn't really most of what the academy does. Most of what we're doing is just doing the work. We're doing cancer research, we're doing history, we're doing foreign policy, we're doing whatever. And it's not really that political. I'm just doing my work and the administration is punishing me. And I am very sympathetic to this. As I say, I'm against what the administration has done to research funding. I think this is disastrous. I think they have gone way overboard in their attempts not just to cut research funding, but to interfere with academic freedom, which is an incredibly important protection for the ability to hunt for truth, free from political interference. The issue is academic institutions weren't necessarily walking the talk on academic freedom. It was academic freedom for some people, not for everyone. If you were a conservative on campus, you didn't feel very free. And I have heard from a lot of conservatives, and I cannot tell you how angry they are about what happened over the last 10 years. Academics need to understand academic freedom not as something to which they are entitled by natural law. Academic freedom is a bargain that you are cutting with society. We give you the money and the freedom to pursue the truth wherever it leads, but you have to actually do that. And what you tell us has to be your best guess at what is true about the world, not your best guess at what ought to be true about the world. And those academics who were just keeping their head down and doing their work when all of this was going on, who were absolutely the majority, I understand why they're mad that this is now falling on them. But every time people kept their heads down and didn't say anything, they were allowing those activists to borrow their institutional credibility and squander it. And eventually that's what happened. The public marked down academia's credit rating. Now, as I say, ideology isn't the whole story here. Degrees still pay on average, but the wage premium for degrees has stalled. It really kind of flattened 2010, 2015. And that meant, first of all, that as costs kept increasing, the deal wasn't as good, right? We had allowed people to borrow a lot of money to fund educations on the presumption that they would get these increasing wage levels, and not all of them did. And especially as that premium flattens, the people at the bottom, the marginal students that we're pushing into school, who may not have the social capital to navigate the university system the way the previous students did, who may have deficits in preparation, those people weren't getting the same return. And that itself has made people ask, why am I paying these people all that money? Now, one answer that you could give is like, they're also doing all this other valuable social work. But the more that academia seemed like it was a political project rather than a, selfless, idealistic pursuit of truth, the less convincing that argument was. And then, of course, there's been the brutal recent job market. And, in early 2026, about 5.7% of recent grads are still unemployed, and over 40% are underemployed, which means they have jobs that don't need a degree. Now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that they're doomed to low-wage work forever. I worked as a secretary out of college and again after grad school, and here I am gainfully employed in a professional job. But it's not the smooth launch that families were promised when they were plunking down all that money and signing and co-signing those student loans. The golden ticket era of college is at an end. And during that era, families tolerated the eccentricity, right? Your kid joined the Balalaika Orchestra, fine. The administration seems a little politically radical, fine. We'll live with it as long as Junior gets a good job. It's kind of like you go to a restaurant, it's cheap and the food's wonderful, you're going to tolerate bad service and indifferent decor. If the cost of food doubles and the quality starts to fall, you look around and you're like, why am I driving all of this way to have sullen waitresses and cheap scuffed linoleum? So I would argue that economic anxiety didn't exactly create the distrust. What it did was remove the cushion that let universities ignore it. Now, one of the rejoinders I'm likely to get is that academia doesn't really lean left, and that's a trend that's been getting worse steadily. In 1969, about 1 in 4 professors was conservative. By 1990, it was 18%. By 2017, it was 12%. And in the same time period, the liberal and far left contingent went from 42% to 60%. Even that probably understates the problem because tenure slows change down a lot, right? You've got the pattern that we're seeing in this data is that the conservatives tend to be very old. They are the people who are at the end of their careers. As they are leaving, they're being replaced by younger liberals. And that makes it even harder to stay a moderate, much less a conservative. So why is this happening? Well, one thing, there is a pipeline problem in academia. When I talk to my friends in academia who are conservatives, there are some, they tell me the same thing, is that they're not getting the conservatives into the graduate school pipeline. That said, that doesn't mean that it's just a harmless thing. It's just a random coincidence. No one's responsible for it. Look, I'm a right-leaning person who has worked in mainstream media institutions, which tend to lean left, for the past 25 years. I chose to do this. I have no complaints. But I will say that it is a choice, and you have to be a certain kind of person to do it because no one enjoys being the skunk at the garden party. No one likes knowing that people around them may resent or disdain their views. So when academia is overwhelmingly liberal, think about it this way. For liberal people, that's like a job benefit. You are surrounded by people who are like you. For conservatives, it's a tax. So it's just about cultural fit. That is exacerbated by the fact that academic jobs have been getting scarcer over the years for a bunch of reasons, including the adjunctification of the professoriate, where a lot more classes are being taught by adjuncts. We're producing hugely more PhDs than we have tenure-track jobs. So when you have a tenure-track job, you don't have a lot of them to give out, and you can afford to be extremely choosy. And that gives you more scope to discriminate by things like politics. And then there's the fact that politics has become increasingly moralized over the last 50 years. And even over the last 10, it's really accelerated. So when I moved to Washington in 2007, liberals, conservatives, and libertarians routinely hung out, drank together, sometimes got married, and that pretty much ended sometime during the Obama administration. And when I said this to some younger colleagues once, they were kind of shocked. It hadn't occurred to them that this could happen. And that has been happening all over the country. We are sorting politically, especially after, of course, the election of Trump, when things got extremely angry. The problem is that when you are in a moral community It is really hard to know what your blind spots are. To get the best results, you need people who are motivated to spot the flaws in the shared assumptions, and most of all, on the politically charged questions that shape law and policy. Because inside, it's not the conspiracy of anyone's imagining. It doesn't look like villainy. It doesn't feel like villainy. It feels like discernment. The study on the other side, I mean, look, it's got such a small sample, and what is going on with their regressions? The study that supports my views, I mean, okay, so sure, it's imperfect. All research has flaws, but it really points us in a very important direction. Right? Same methodological problem, different emotional reaction, depending on whether you want to believe or don't want to believe. This is what social psychologist Jonathan Haidt has called the can I or must I distinction. When we see information that supports something that we want to believe, we ask ourselves, can I believe it? Do I have the minimum amount of evidence that I need to think that this might be true? When we see evidence that contradicts something that we really want to believe, we ask ourselves, must I believe it? Is the evidence so overwhelming that I cannot ignore it? And this actually, that tendency helps us fool ourselves. Because you can always point to the time when you did acknowledge a point for the other side, because you were forced to. And that lets you not see all the times when you're giving your own side points that they haven't really quite earned. Now, to be clear, I am not saying this is a liberal problem. This is a human problem. Conservatives aren't more virtuous on this point. Their biases just point in different directions. So they ask different questions. Now, these are the most dramatic cases, but they're not the only ones. But these mistakes were real, and the fact is that almost no one tried to stop them. I know this feels unfair to the silent majority because it is unfair to the silent majority. But that's the deal with a big institution that is certifying facts to the world. The public doesn't know you. The public doesn't have any way to observe what you were doing. They trust the profession. They trust the institution. They don't vet you. So when trust drops, you're going to sink with it. You may not have wanted a political fight, but someone picked one for you. So let's talk about how we fix this. So here's the bind. The universities are incredibly hard to reform. That can also be it can be a feature as well as a bug, because the universities have been around for a very long time. And I often hear people cite that when I point out that maybe some reform is needed. They say, we've been here since the medieval era. We're probably going to survive anyone who's trying to attack us. Fair enough. But, it's never wise to take for granted your longevity. And the thing is that some of the very factors that make the institution so durable also make it really hard to govern, because you've got basically a horizontal and a vertical power structure. You've got a horizontal, which is the institutions themselves, but then you've also got the disciplines which cut across institutions. And this makes it really difficult to fix the viewpoint diversity problem, because as an academic of my acquaintance said, I can admit conservative graduate students, but where would I get them jobs? So how do we fix it? Well, there's a few ways. One is moral exhortation. This is basically, I think, the logic of Heterodox Academy, an organization that has been founded by academics to promote open inquiry and neutrality within the academy. I think this is really valuable. I love Heterodox Academy. The problem is that often the people who need it think it's about someone else. Everyone's for academic freedom until they decide the person that they dislike is illegitimate. So what about building a new university, right? It's like the University of Austin. Now, there are real advantages to this. You are free of the old feuds, and you can make your own governance structures. The difficulty is it's extremely expensive. It's extremely slow. It's very hard to get accreditation, for example. And there's a risk to it, which is that you end up with a mirror image monoculture, with anti-wokeness becoming its own loyalty test. So a third option is conquest. So you just take over an existing school. This is what has happened at the New College of Florida, where the governor of Florida has authorized basically an entire gut rehabilitation of the faculty. The advantage of this is you have existing structures that you can build on, and it's fast. But it also means that you are going to have a big fight on your hand with faculty, with students who liked things the way they were. And you also have that same risk that you're going to end up with swapping one orthodoxy for another. That's not what academia needs. It does not need to become a conservative mirror image of the left-wing project that many disciplines have been. It needs to be a pluralistic place where a lot of different things, from the Marxists to the Murray Rothbardites, are all fighting it out to see who has the best idea. So then the fourth solution, right, you can build new centers inside old universities, these civic schools and so forth, the great books programs. special honors programs. This uses existing infrastructure and it reaches current students rather than having to go find people who want to go to a heterodox school, which means that you can grow it reasonably fast. The danger is that it becomes like a quarantine zone for conservatives on campus, because the really important thing here is that people who have different views, conservative, libertarian, that those people get tucked into a nice building where they never interact with other people, and what other people do not have to confront serious questions about their own ideas. That's a real temptation of these schools precisely because it keeps peace on campus. My broad take is that we need all four of these things, but I also think we need more. We need conservatives and liberals to recognize that they have a joint problem and to some extent, collaborate on joint problems to fix it. So, what does that look like in practice? Well, this is necessarily a bit vague. This is a podcast, not an action plan, but I think the first step is that the left has to admit it has a problem. And I think academia is really dragging its feet on this, and it really needs to step it up. I'm not going to get into an argument with you over who is more at fault. Were you morally wrong or the Trump administration more morally wrong? The main thing is that you have the power to change this. You have the power to change the environment on campus that is creating the decline in public trust and giving Republicans the ammunition with which to attack you.
So step one, just admit it's real. Stop claiming it's just GOP misinformation, and don't try to circle the wagons and wait this out. You can't just count on, well, there'll be a Democrat in 2029. Because the way things are going, there might be a Republican in 2033, and I'm pretty sure they're still going to be mad. I know you're mad too. I know many of you are furious at Trump, and you know what? So am I in many ways. But hunkering down, it might feel safe, but it just locks you into a position that is terribly exposed. And folks, they have a lot of heavy artillery.
So to get less vulnerable, you're going to have to make a project of diversifying. You're going to have to publicly renounce the excesses, not just quietly. The pattern when things like this happen, and this is certainly true on the Republican side, is that people just want to walk away and pretend it didn't happen. You saw this with the Iraq War, right? I'll take this moment to apologize again for my support of the Iraq War. I was incorrect about it. It was stupid, and I regret it. But in general, the instinct is, well, that was a mistake. But if I admit my mistake, I am giving them ammunition to attack me. It's just going to get worse. But in this case, remember, this is not about Republicans. This is about the broader public. They don't trust you. And they're not going to trust you if you don't admit that you did something that made them not trust you. Is it embarrassing? Yes. Are Republicans going to grab onto it and scream about it? Yes, but it's less embarrassing or upsetting than another round of funding cuts. You've got to admit that this happened and that it was a problem, and then you have to actively recruit real viewpoint diversity.
A lot of academic institutions are not only not backing off of the way that they turned political over the last decade, they're actually doubling down. The American Association of University Professors just announced its first political endorsement in its over 100-year history, putting its name behind left-wing Democratic Senate candidate Abdul El-Sayed. This is, to put it mildly, not helping the problem. In fact, it's the opposite of helping the problem. It is a terrible, horrible, no good, very bad idea. It's looking at conservatives who think that professors are all a bunch of lefty activists and saying, yep, you're right, we sure are.
You have to get the institution out of the politics business, not by policing speech of individual academics. They have an absolute right to talk about what they think should happen in policy, but it has to be deinstitutionalized, not just at the school level, but also in the disciplines who are asserting that their job is to end capitalism or tear down social structures. That is not a way to rebuild fences with the public. Now, look, if you didn't do this in the first place, I get it that you feel like this is not my job. I did not sign up for this. I signed up to do teaching and research. But, I mean, who else is going to do it then? If you leave that job open and someone else takes it, it's going to be the politicians with the sledgehammers. So what do conservatives have to do, right? I mean, one thing I would like it if they would ask Donald Trump or tell Donald Trump to stop defunding critical scientific research. Scientific research is not like a car. You can't just turn it off and on. He's doing incalculable damage to one of the biggest economic and prosperity. He's doing incalculable damage to one of the biggest engines, not just of American economic prosperity, but also of health benefits and scientific benefits to the whole world. So you got to decide, do you actually want to change academia, or do you just enjoy being angry about academia? Because rage is great for traffic, but it is terrible for institution building. If you want to actually fix academia, you need conservatives to go into academia, and they're not going to if you keep insisting that it's all blue-haired Marxists who are conspiring against them. And you should want to fix these institutions, not just because they're doing science. That's great. They're also teaching our kids. They're preserving our heritage. All the classic stuff. You might not like everything that they're saying, but they're preserving documents. They're finding new facts about the world. I understand that you don't like everything that they're finding, but that's why you need to be part of it. You have to help repair the pipeline piece by piece. If you don't, no one else is going to. You got to build grad students and mentorships and fellowships and tenure lines and grants. I know at the moment, because you're mad about a lot of stuff that happened. I am mad too. It feels really good to watch the Trump administration smashing academia for a lot of people, including some conservatives I talk to in academia who are just fed up. And they feel like, well, if I do this, we're going to show them that they have to change. That's what's going to do it. But you got to resist the one weird trick to fix academia that mostly involves smashing it to pieces. Partly because most of the people in academia don't deserve it. And it also costs you the science and the research that they're generating. But most importantly, remember the conservative creed that institutions matter and traditions hold knowledge, and durable change is patient reform, not ecstatic revolution. Don't destroy the village in order to save it. Don't hand it over to the activists or the politicians. The first step is admitting that the institution has a problem, but the second step is refusing to become that problem. This has been another episode of Reasonably Optimistic. Follow us wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're on YouTube, please like and subscribe. And hey, I'd like to hear from you in the comments or on email. What do you think academia needs to do? And how likely do you think they are to succeed? Until next time.